Joining us on the phones this morning, editor of the Quorum Report. It's Scott Braddock. Scott, good morning. How are you today?
Doing well, Chad, and I hope everybody in Lubbock is doing well. We are all from Austin to Lubbock to Houston to South Texas, DFW, everywhere in between, waiting with bated breath, right, for the governor's announcement this afternoon. We expect him to speak at 2:30 with this big announcement on what businesses are allowed to reopen amid the coronavirus pandemic.
Yes, and you know, that's kind of the big question is what the governor will actually announce, because everyone's kind of been kept in the dark, it seems, as to what the governor will say exactly, correct?
100%. He has been very, very secretive about this, if you will. He has not said exactly what he's going to do, although he's made some public comments saying that people might be able to go back to movie theaters, hair salons, dine-in restaurants, and church as well under a new executive order that he's supposed to unveil this afternoon. But the details of how that's supposed to work, Chad, that's what's been kept so secretive. The governor held some conference calls last week for legislators, private conference calls, in which he talked a little bit about the idea that they will have a robust plan in place for testing and also have a plan in place for what we've heard a lot about in the last few weeks, what's called contact tracing, where they try to figure out who has been exposed to coronavirus and then who else those people have exposed to it. This is going to be a massive undertaking if it works the way we expect it to work. But the governor's got a fine line to try to figure out here. Is it walking that tightrope, Chad? Because on that call, the governor acknowledged the way, and this is what we were told, from conversations with people who were on this conference call, and we reported it out at QuorumReport.com. He told lawmakers that he did not want to see the president sort of come down on him in the same way that the president came down on the governor of Georgia, where they've already been reopening some businesses there. And the president's behavior on this, the president's comments on this, really it puts the governors in a situation where they've got to, and I think you've said it this way, they've got to lead their states because the president's not telling them exactly what to do. They unveiled some guidelines weeks ago for how states are supposed to handle this, but I think, as Matt Martin said on the radio, when the president had done that, he said, "Do you think that Governor Abbott maybe had hoped the president would be a little more specific so he would know what to do?" And I would think that, he probably would like to see some more specifics. When the president's saying some of the things that he said, like, liberate Virginia or liberate Michigan or any of these other places, and then he turns right around, and when the governor of Georgia basically says, okay, I'm going to liberate Georgia, and then the president says, maybe not. Maybe you ought to slow down a little bit there. So I'd expect Abbott to move a little bit slower than that.
What it sounded like to me when the president was upset with Georgia, it was the opening of these personal services. That was supposed to be, if I go back and and read the Opening Up America plan, that was kind of phase 2, right? The hair salons and the nail salons and stuff like that. That, to me, I thought that was in phase 2. So I do wonder what the timeline will be for the governor here of saying, yeah, you'll be able to go get a haircut, just not yet.
Right. It may take some time, and that's a key point. What the president has said on his Twitter feed and sometimes at the podium doesn't always match up with what was in that plan and those guidelines.
Right.
And so politically, the question is, are people going to side more with the president in his rhetoric as far as he's talked about moving things along faster, or do people realize that, hey, you got to go a little bit slower? And I've seen some polling in various states on this where people overwhelmingly, I think, more than 70%, say that they do want to reopen the economy, but they want to do that after health experts say that it's okay. All this stuff about flattening the curve, Chad, which, I don't know if you or I had ever even heard that phrase before all of this, but flattening the curve and trying to contain how many people are being infected quickly, that is mainly focused on trying to make sure that the hospital systems don't get overrun with these COVID-19 patients so that they can treat those COVID patients and everybody else who needs to go to the hospital for whatever other reasons, except for elective surgeries, of course, which have been cracked down on during this time. But that's, of course, tough on the hospitals because they do make a lot of their money on those elective surgeries. It's a serious source of revenue for them. But if you flatten the curve as far as the impact on humans, all that does is change the date of when people die. right? It
Right.
just extends it out into the future. And so there does have to be a second and third phase to how we address this. You can't just flatten the curve forever, and that's all you ever have to do. And I think some folks may have gotten that impression. But what we need to see is more testing. We need to see the contact tracing. And the people who are upset about the idea that they might have to wear a mask in public, the whole idea of wearing it is so that you have protection for yourself and for others as part of an overall strategy to try to reopen business, because regardless, however those businesses open up, like the hair salons, like the movie theaters, restaurants, etc., it's not going to be the same as when you were going there before.
Yeah. Some are going to have different rules in place.
Yes.
I had, and I want to get your opinion on this, Scott, because you and I think we've talked about before, the executive order from Governor Abbott, the stay-at-home, non-stay-at-home order.
Non-stay-at-home order,
Yeah.
Yes.
It hasn't been exactly clear as to, again, except for tattoo shops, hair salons, nail salons, those personal touch places, it hasn't exactly been conveyed who exactly is in charge and who gets to make the decisions. I had the former governor on earlier today.
Yeah.
Former Governor Rick Perry, and he said, in his opinion, that it can be up to the county judge, and that if the county judge wanted to call the governor's office and say, hey, guess what? Here and he brought up Brewster County being an example. Here in Brewster County, if we want to open up right now, we're going to go ahead and reopen, restaurants and retail, and we're going to go ahead and do that. Isn't there has that debate been playing out statewide, even among lawmakers, as to who exactly is in charge here?
Absolutely, and this is, I think, a real case study in the way Texas is set up to work, and maybe a case study in how it works pretty well. If you look at the different approaches that have been taken in Dallas County, Harris County, here in Travis County, Bexar County, some of these counties where they've been pretty aggressive, the big urban counties, they've been able to contain the spread of the virus such that they haven't needed the extra hospital capacity. Remember these hospitals that were stood up, in Dallas at the K. Bailey Hutchison Center, and they have one at NRG Park down in Houston. The one in Houston, they closed it down without ever using it, and they said, we've done such a good job of making sure our hospitals haven't been overrun, but a lot of that has been done through the local decisions. It wasn't so much because of what Governor Abbott had done. I mean, in Travis County, one of the biggest and most consequential decisions that was made was the decision to not have South by Southwest, which at the time might have seemed, a little over the top. It was a hit of $300 million to the local economy and to the state economy, frankly. And some people were, of course, upset, but it looks pretty good in hindsight. And look, the communities and their leaders, they know what's going on in their cities, in their counties, and they've been able to make these decisions. Now, the governor, who is currently in office, doesn't necessarily agree with that. You know that in one of his executive orders, he had said that if anything in his order conflicts with local orders, that his order overrides theirs. I'm not sure that's something that Governor Perry would have put in an executive order. I think he was more in the old school way of thinking that local control, that style of Republican, what I call sort of Republican classic, was that local control should rule the day. But Governor Abbott doesn't feel that way, and we'll see what he puts in this order this afternoon. It was probably going to be around, along the same line, saying that if counties or cities conflict with whatever I have in my order as governor, then I override them. We would have to see, Chad, if they bucked him on that. If they said no, we're going to do something else, may have to take him to court and have that, may have it play out that way.
Yeah, but I mean, you do see. Unless I'm wrong and I'm mistaken, what happened in Colleyville this weekend? Everyone in the state knew that they were going to open up restaurants.
Yes.
And I did not hear of any raids taking place or restaurants closed down or anything like that. So it seems to me that these cities and counties do have a little bit of leverage they can use.
They've got some leverage, and think about it in the other direction in Houston, where the Harris County judge has ordered, starting today, people have to wear a face mask if they're out in public. But look at the way that they're enforcing it. The Sheriff's Department and Houston Police Department have said that their officers, what they're going to do if they see you walking around in Houston without a face mask, they're just going to give you one and use it as an educational opportunity to say, you have been ordered to wear this, you need to wear it. And I would think that most people would agree that if people were still jerks to the cops and wouldn't wear it at that point, that they probably ought to face a fine.
What, and that is interesting, that Harris County, they're not the first county to announce you have to wear a mask plan. I mean, this, I believe this started in Laredo, actually. Was maybe the first city to say you need to wear a mask in public, and it's grown. Why was it because the lieutenant governor made an issue of it that it kind of blew up in Harris County?
The lieutenant governor made a big deal about it, and so did some of his political allies. The former Harris County Republican Party chairman, Jared Woodfill, along with arch-conservative activist Steve Hotze, were leading the charge on this and saying that the county judge was acting in a way that was just excessive government overreach. I always tell people, and I covered news in Houston for a long time, Chad, they have different politics in Houston. It's not the same as anywhere else. It's a little more rough and tumble, and there really are no rules in Houston politics. The only rule is, try to beat me. If you're better than me, then try to beat me. It's bare knuckles, and I would have expected, and some people ask the question if this was driven by race or gender, because the county judge there is a 29-year-old Latina in her first executive position, and some had wondered if the former white male Republican county judge, if he had done the same thing, if he had ordered the same thing, Ed Emmett was his name, I have a feeling that he's the kind of executive who would have ordered something like this, and I do think that the activists in Houston would have probably tried to sue him as well and protest against him as well. Remember, these are the same activists who also sued the governor over his one of his orders, and so they're a little over the top in their politics there. The lieutenant governor had joined in as well, saying that this was, as you mentioned, excessive government overreach, and some of the other Republican office holders had done the same. And you may have seen that Senator Paul Bettencourt, Representative Briscoe Cain, and some others have already talked about filing legislation in the next session next year that would essentially take away some of the powers of local officials to be able to do these kinds of things during emergencies.
Yeah, when we had Representative Burrows on last week, he had said the same thing, that he it would not surprise him, is the way he put it, if they go through and clarify and redo this emergency declaration, which, when you go through something like this, I think it makes sense, right? Everyone who I've talked to, every elected official, they've all said they're working without a plan. That they have just no idea. That they're just going through and doing what they think is right. I think we're going to learn a lot. I think we already have learned a lot, and that's going to kind of pave the way for the future.
Yeah, they do have these orders in Harris, Dallas, Travis, Bexar County, Webb County, down in Laredo, as you mentioned, and this debate now about whether there should be legislation to take away some of the powers of local officials. You can think of it this way, Chad. It is an acknowledgement that if they think they need to file legislation and pass it to take that power away, it is an acknowledgement that they do have it now.
Yeah, that is true. Scott, what are you going to be working on over at Quorum Report?
I think it's going to be all eyes on Governor Abbott this afternoon and parsing exactly what he has to say about this. As you know, Chad, he might confuse everybody with what he says, because that's what he did in the first major executive order about this, and he might even be trying to explain himself the very next day about what he actually said. So we'll get into all of it and try to make sure people have accurate information about this, because it is as serious as it could be, because we're talking about people's lives and we're talking about their livelihoods. We'll have it all for you at quorumreport.com. You can sign up for our free emails there at quorumreport.com. We'll let you know what he says.
Very good. Scott, thank you. Appreciate it.
Stay safe, Chad. We'll talk soon.
You too. That's Scott Braddock, editor, quorumreport.com. We'll take our break and get to your phone calls, your text messages, and more.